go. Thanks. Good evening, everyone. I'm Karen Nelson. I'm Dean of the School of Architecture at the BAC, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to the third event in the BAC's lecture series, Just Space. The BAC has been recognized with distinction for its leadership role in educating an extraordinarily diverse student body to help bring about social equity through design. This lecture is supported in part by Eastern Savings Bank. June A. Grant is a registered architect. She's a past president of the San Francisco Bay chapter of NOMA, the National Organization of Minority Architects, and the founder and design principal of Blink Lab Architecture. June's firm is a boutique research-based architecture and urban design practice. She launched Blink Lab in 2014 to address issues found in architecture, design, and urban regeneration of cities and communities. Her belief in cultural empathy, data research, and new technologies is integral to design the futures that are inclusive and healing. Ms. Grant is also an Acadia board member, a 2019 Yerba Buena Center for the Arts 100 honoree. She's the 2020 CEDAW Women's Human Rights honoree, and also the 2020 Center for Architecture's 10th annual J. Max Bond Jr. Lecturer. In her lectures, you see Ms. Grant drawing on her own experiences and weaving it together with the communities and clients that she works with. Her authentic enthusiasm for changing society through what may seem initially like small commissions, and her ability to create income sources to make more of what different community members have is so completely inspiring. We asked her to join us this spring. In this lecture, June Grant will share how digital fabrication and emerging technologies, coupled with strategic approach to play a critical role in crafting both short and long-term community-led urban regeneration. Her firm, Blink Lab, has 3 mandates: commitment to design exploration, advocacy for holistic solutions, and integration of technology as a central component for a regenerative society. Please welcome June A. Grant.
Karen, thank you for that. Can you hear me properly? Thank you for that great introduction. I truly appreciate the honor of speaking to the student body. Is there feedback? Is that better? Okay. Thank you for the invitation. It's kind of like a positive gain of the COVID pandemic, is being able to reach such a wide audience for the first time. So Karen did a fantastic introduction to the practice, and I want to place myself in we're going to focus more on the projects that are less fee for hire, client base, and more the ones that came to us through the community. So as Karen said, we're a sustainable design practice. We focus on regenerative solutions for communities. And part of this presentation, which I want the students to think about, is how you as an architect can actually be the person that reimagines agency through using design, advocacy, and digital tools. And this is critical, I think, in how we address some of the issues that some communities face, communities that do not and cannot afford to hire an architecture firm, but they also need design solutions, they need our services. And so the onus is on us, and this is why the practice was started, was to find a way to have private clients, but also work closely with communities to address the issues that are of concern to them. So we are a sustainable design practice, but we do not put technology at the forefront. What we are is that we situate ourselves as catalytic change agents in communities that look like this. This is a community that is 5 minutes drive from my studio. It is reflective of what has happened through the last 30, 40 years. It was a healthy middle-class community, healthy middle-class African-American community. And as a result of the introduction of the highway, like many other African-American cities, they resulted in the decline, the economic decline and disinvestment. And so what you see is the effect of 30 to 40 years of neglect, 30 to 40 years of really no attention by city agencies, urban planning groups to address the social cultural needs of this community. But what is also interesting is that this was a neighborhood that I was already studying through observation. And my client in this case is Altaneer Baker Cook. She was raised in this community. She still lives there. And we met maybe 2016, 2017, where she said, you know, June, we want a library. We need a library. And she always had a library in community. And I asked her, well, where'd the library go? And she said, well, they demolished the 2 libraries when the highway came in. And so recognizing that Altaneer was 81 and the library was probably going to take 5 to 10 years before it was built, we need to find a way to really get this idea and really build a groundswell around the need of a library. And I think we all agree that the library is essential, but you have to really galvanize support around it because we no longer have private individuals building libraries like the Carnegie. We no longer have Carnegies. And so what does a community do? So she was able to provide me photographs of what the community used to have. These are small reading rooms that played a cultural and social role. It's where young adults learn to be adults. They learn social skills. They learned how to focus. They learned how to prepare for college. This community, the Hoover Durant community, was the largest African-American middle-class community. It had the first African-American fire station during the time of segregation. They had 2 libraries. The first African-American librarian came from this community. The first Black Oakland mayor came from this community. So this was a community that was well-read. It was literate, it was ambitious, and it had a lot of pride, and it has a lot of pride, and it still is ambitious. And so my charge was to find a way to provide a kind of disruption to what was there. When Altaneer approached me, I was actually studying this site because it was interesting to me. We had 2 kind of wide streets coming to a Y intersection, a kind of an X intersection that resulted in this pie shape. And I couldn't understand why did we have this large piece of concrete and tar in the middle and no trees. It was so unfriendly. And to me, it was a point of study, but also I thought, okay, well, I'm studying this site and Altaneer has a major issue that I want to bring to the forefront. Why don't we occupy this site? But what I didn't want was one of those guerrilla here today, gone tomorrow projects. What we wanted to do was create a legal structure that allowed us to be there in the public space at a regular schedule. So we have a program in Oakland called the Adopt a Spot. In fact, many cities have this program. It's where you sign a 1-page document, you agree to take care of a piece of concrete or public land for a year. The city will give you the brooms and shovels and garbage container. You clean up the site and the city will come and pick up the trash and the brooms and on a regular basis. So there's no investment by you whatsoever other than time. And so we signed an agreement to this piece of land, which is actually 250 square feet of concrete, not including the extra bit on the right. But we also got an agreement by the parking lot owner, which are young brother and sister who had just inherited the parcel. We got them to agree to lend us the parking when we needed it, when we planning to do this, what I call the street corner library campaign. And the idea was, because it's the apex of a pie, we were basically jutting out into the street with our public presence around the need for a library. We were bringing a public amenity issue to the forefront. So one of the things that we want to do is to be able to anchor that site with some symbols. And what you're looking at is one of the bookshelves, a tower bookshelf, but the tower design is actually based on these monumental towers that we see in many exclusive neighborhoods. They mark the entry into what was predominantly a white neighborhood from the past. It was exclusionary. We took those obelisk shape, gave them a curve, a little bit of a profile, and then kind of like wanted to toot the message about culture and history and books. And so this became the design of the bookshelf, where there's a tower lighting on the top, and this is actually just a paper model. And then we put the model in Sketchfab online, so that the community members could start to interact and become familiar with the design of the bookshelf and the initiative. And this is critical, having that online medium for communities to share what our intent was. 5 minutes away from the site is a mill worker who had a CNC machine. And so I sent him my files for him to cut the pieces. And the idea was that the community would assemble the bookshelf. This is just us testing that the design actually works. So we dismantled the whole thing, took it to the site the next day, and basically whoever showed up for the first ever street corner library would assemble the bookshelf, which pretty much marking the launch of the library campaign, which is actually a pretty fun event. We had these really big burly guys who looked at it and went, oh, it's just a puzzle piece, let's do this. And they really got into it. And I was able to start talking to them about digital fabrication tools and making, and the joy of making, and be able to start a conversation about continuing education around new technologies. So this is us on our first day setting up. And over time, what happens is the books arrive, people who are driving by, people who are walking by would stop, and the books are actually donated books. And so you leave a book and take a book. So we had a site plan showing the layout of our 250 square feet. We have these 7-foot by 4-foot black foam core boards, which are the wish boards, and you pretty much write your wish about what you want the library to be. We had maps where individuals could say, you know, I was born here, but I moved here, my grandmother lived here, be able to document the history of the community through their participation. But most importantly was a check-in desk, because it's absolutely essential that we record every single person who attended, because what we're doing is not just having an event, we're building up the foundation to go and get funds, and we need people's names and numbers. So these are photos over the original crew in the beginning. This is what the board looked like maybe after a couple of months. Now both sides of the boards are covered with ideas. And what critical was the Oakland Public Library Service bringing their mobile cart to the event, because this was symbolically saying the Oakland Public Library supports this community's desire to have a library. So we're building up advocacy by having the Oakland Public Library attend our little quote unquote guerrilla action. And so having that official stamp of approval by Oakland Public Library, and having an interactive way, chalk and cheapy foam core, able to have public participation in the middle on the corner, we really galvanized over 2 years, quite a lot of support. But what we also did was organize each event to have a guest attendee. So on the bottom middle is the niece of the first Black librarian, Oakland librarian, and she was able to tell her aunt's story and the story of her family, story of the community. And on the lower right is the grandnephew of the first Black mayor of Oakland. And at every event, we had a video camera and we recorded each guest. They answered one question: what does a library mean to you? And by recording their stories, we're able to archive kind of like the history of the neighborhood, what it was before, what it is today, what the community would like to see tomorrow. And then rather than have these stored on, a disk, see it somewhere, we created a website, a Facebook page, because what we were doing, we needed to send the message loud and clear in a public forum that there was a crime committed, which was the library was demolished. There was a desire by the community to restore the library, and here is the evidence, and be able to spread that message, which is pre-Instagram, spread that message around. So now we have, I think, 17 recordings of interviews. And this is the site of the guerrilla action, the street corner library, was strategic because what we wanted was actually the site across the street. And so we kind of like set up our tooting or action on this side of the pavement, knowing that this was our target. We were trying to let the owner of this site, who was an elderly man around 80, that we wanted this site, and what happens, could he leave it to us? Could he deed it to us in his will so that we could have this site and purchase this site from the brother and sister who couldn't decide what they want to do with it, close off the street and create the library campus. And that was really our goal, and this is still our goal, which is to actually have a library campus, not just a reading room, become the anchor to this community, because right now the community has no declared entry point. So over the years, the initiative started 2017. These are the supporters that they've gained over the years. And now the library initiative has been officially adopted by the city of Oakland, and they're just about to start the feasibility study to determine where this library might go. This is critical to getting a library project off the table. So that was West Oakland. And now I'm going to pivot to a location we call Deep East Oakland. Oakland is huge. And this is the furthest edge. And again, this project is really, what I'm going to show is really an awning project, but I really peel back the history of why our buildings look the way they do. These are, you can see the effect of the international style, modernism. You get rid of all the frills. But also what happened with modernization was Black folks were pushed to the eastern edge of Oakland as the city became more famous, more people moved in, industry changed. But being pushed to the edge, what also was paramount in urban planning approaches was the importance of the car, the importance of mass transit. And again, another story about the impact of transit. No planning effort. The only planning initiative was around cars, and the latest planning initiative is around the bus rapid transit system. Now, it is instrumental to notice that a BRT line oddly never goes through a wealthy white neighborhood, but it always goes through a poor Black neighborhood. And so the plan is they're going to rip up this road to run a BRT line through it. And the result of that 2-year project was that many of these struggling Black businesses which were already really struggling, would probably close. And this is pre-pandemic. But also what I found when I walk on that stretch of International Boulevard by 73rd is this cacophony of signs and colors. And while I'm not necessarily for a streamlined everything with no nuance, there was no organization around text and language and form. There also a sense of safety because you're so being unsafe because you're so exposed. No trees, so it's hot. There's a lot of solar gain, heat island effect, very few trees. And so what I saw was a disaster from this BRT line. But what the government decided was that they would give a $2 million grant program to help the businesses along this during the construction time. Well, the program was 2 years delayed. I know funding has been dispersed. I have no idea if any Black businesses have actually received funding, but I do know that 31 businesses closed between 2016 and 2018. And so as a result of the pandemic, who knows how many more businesses have closed as a result of the construction plus the pandemic. So this program made me think one more time, well, these are the people who are going to be impacted. This is Mr. Silver. He applied for the grant. Unfortunately, he died. Although he was approved for the grant, he died before it was finally approved. But on the right, you see his building. He ran a soda pop place. He did ice cream, and there's a middle school across the street. And he loved at 3 o'clock when the kids came over. That was his moment. He loved 3 o'clock in the student year. But you can also see that the face of the building is clean, but a lot amount of solar glare. There are no awnings. They're struggling to keep the interior cool. And in fact, I can tell you, it felt like 100 degrees on the inside, and none of the windows are operable. So when I met Mr. Silver, the first thing I thought of is that we have to design an awning system that works for this location. And can we design something that was not your awning, your cloth awning that actually resulted in the darkness and you couldn't see inside, but can we be a lot more sensitive? Walking maybe a block away from the store, the florist, she had ripped up part of the sidewalk and put in her own garden, beautiful calla lilies. So for me, what I saw was a sense of pride and place. And then there was this amazing building, brick building with beautiful ceramic coating on the face of the brick. And there are actually quite a few of these interesting buildings in Oakland. And what I wanted to do was find a way to kind of knit this softness of nature, a pattern. Can we start to do that through digital fabrication to create an awning system that was different and unique? On the left is a piece by Jason Kelly Johnson, who's a friend of mine. This is 2 cities over. And what I was looking at was, okay, he's using a flat pack system, repeating the pattern, varying the size of the circles, and through form creating a flower, which was interesting. And on the right is David Ajayi's facade for the African American Museum. But what I was intrigued by was not the pattern, but actually when the pattern meets the sky. What does that affect when you look up and through the filigree? That for me is what is fascinating. And that sky appeal is less, it doesn't come through in Jason's piece on the left, but I really liked his attempt to bring a floral pattern and shape by using a flat pack hard system and using the bent tube to create some kind of flow of form. So looking at these two as 2 examples of how to use digital fabrication, we start to look at it and I said, you know, it's not jiving with me because it's just a stamping of a pattern on metal. So let me go back. So these, again, looking at Oakland, but if you notice on the left, how the roof line was treated with this really ornate metal work. And that began to tell me a little bit about repeating panels, hierarching panels, but also what happens when it's up against the sky. Can we create that delicacy? Because at the street level, you can see the awnings are opaque and everything is, you can't see into the stores, everything is dark. And the same on the right, even though the awning's up, it's still dark on the inside. So I am really fascinated by this zone on the street that's right where the awning would be, where it extends about 4 feet from the building. But one thing you have to know is that the awning must be a coherent system. It had to be affordable because I'm dealing with African-American businesses who are already struggling. But I wanted to bring in this idea of customization into design. And then I had to make it even more difficult for myself. I am an immigrant and I'm interested in the Black migration history. I'm not originally from the US, but this history of people who are on the move and picking up, and what are the aesthetic values that come when they migrate from one location and bring those aesthetic values to another location is fascinating to me. So the question became, can we start to look at historic wrought iron and who made iron patterns and who were examples of work that I really, really admire for their grace and beauty. Philip Simmons is one from, he's no longer with us, from South Carolina, well-known. And his work really appeals to me in his use of material, his understanding of the metal, but also I used to be a welder myself, and I know the beauty of the molten metal and being able to shape it into a form that you like. So when I look at David Ajayi's piece, I find it less interesting because it's just points and lines. And when I look closer at patterns, what I am interested in is, how does the pattern flow? How does it change in scale? How do you manipulate that scale? And how do you get one pattern to flow across a continuous frame? I'm also looking at, how do you pull the eye and move the eye? On the left is Simmons's sketch for the gate, but on the right is the actual gate. And you realize nothing's really static when he gets to making the gate. And things change because the metal is informing the work, the material is informing the work. And that really is interesting to me, is you can draw on paper, but when you're faced with the material, you have to make some decisions about how you want that design to read. And that's where I look at Jason's work and I see, he's repeating the flat pattern, but now it just looks like an object in the sky. What I am really interested in is the movement of line, but also seeing through and past that line. And can we achieve that in an awning design? So I've really set myself up with a massive goal And we're still in the middle of investigating what that might be, but we've started to have a pattern that, first of all, we've shaped the awning so that it's not just at the same height, it actually arcs. The pattern travels across the face of it and it changes in scale as it travels. But what we're now looking at, because I've taken away so much of the material that is now too flimsy. And so now I have to go back and figure out what is that structural logic that's going to give the awning some rigidity so that it stays in place. We'll also be able to anchor to the building and still be this really interesting view from above as you look through it to the sky. So it's a work in progress. We're now at the point where we're testing material thickness. We're testing what happens when you take away a certain amount of material. And then I'm really trying to avoid the grid metal frame that you just slap the panel on. I'm really trying to have it be where the structure is integral to the pattern itself. So that's where we are with this project for International Boulevard. But so we're still looking at icicles on glass. We're looking at G's bend quilts and the stitching pattern. We're looking at planktons and jellyfish, and we're looking at ribbing in cathedrals to help us to understand the role of structure in pattern, the role of the actual material that made the structure, the material that made the pattern, and how is that material influencing the actual flow of pattern. We're still at this questioning phase, and it's going to be this long, torturous exercise, but as designers, that's what we like to do, is to explore, and eventually we'll have to produce something that we put on the wall. So this is where we're at with the project, where we're starting to investigate various sources from nature and culture to help inform the design of the awning, as well as recognizing that, the sun as it hits the building, this is all going to influence what the final design of the awning looks like. But in the meantime, what we did was this quick beautification project for the same community, for an abandoned structure at a park. It's not a park, it's a piece of land, 25 acres, that the community has rented from the city, where we have drive-in movies right now. And so they asked me, could I do something with the tower? And I said, well, why don't we just hang some addressable LEDs? And so these are actually programmable. It has 8 patterns. And so what we've done is add a little sparkle in a community that the city has not really done much for. And now I want to talk about really the project that shows where design, advocacy, and technology really came together in a really beautiful way. And what I'd like the students or the listeners to think about are who was the agent, the aha moment to the project, the tools and techniques, and then how we resolved it. This is the California Hotel. It's the historic building. It's where the Black Pullman porters used to stay during the time of segregation. But it also, over time, became the home of jazz on San Pablo. This is pretty close to where we do the library campaign. Currently, it's an affordable residential housing, but the ground floor has retail spaces. And one of the retail space occupants is the Oakland Public Conservator of Music. And this is going to play music in a little bit, but this is literally a 1-hour vision exercise in 3D to help provide the OPCM with some idea about what that space is. So let me put my song back up. So the idea for OPC is an after-school program, but also a performance space. So the space had to be adaptable. And what I proposed to Angela Wellman, the director, was that we could use a flat pack system that falls off the wall, that starts to divide the space into practice lounges. It's 1/2-inch plywood faced with 1/2-inch of wool on the back side, so that you create some kind of acoustical treatment for the students as they're practicing, and they're practicing all kinds of instruments all at the same time, as well as provide a lounge space for the students to hang out, as well as the pianos. And everything had to be mobile, but in the middle of the space was this brace frame that she has a lot of music material that we use as cubbies, seating, but it is a primary means of which the space is divided. Once we got the cost estimate, we were way over budget. So we ditched the plywood and kept the wool because we needed to do acoustical treatment for the space because they're really loud. So what that became was the wool became a branding treatment for the space. Their logo, the idea of those, well, the kids may not know that, but the soundboards with in the control rooms for when you're doing a recording, we took that as a motif and really start to play up the black and the gray and give it an idea about what we could do with cheaper material. It would be mounted on the wall. You could just peel it off. This is a direct steal from EHDD's studio where they hang their crit boards on the wall and take them off when the crit's done. We also proposed these triangular lights, which really, of course, direct reference to Black Panther movie, but also in the building that I live in our loft, we have triangular lights. And so I thought they were pretty cool. Why don't we recommend them for this project? But once we got the pricing on the triangle lights, which were $5,000 each, I said, oh, we're gonna have to find a way to do these in a cheaper way. So the solution was we have a lot of machines in the studio. So we have a 3D printer, and the solution was to really break down the light fixture into a series of components. GE was a client of mine a few years before, and I knew that they had this LED 4-foot long light fixture that was available from Home Depot, and they're connectable. They come with the connection devices. And so the idea was, okay, let's string them together. And then what we will do is 3D print the corner. So it took us a little while to figure out the geometry, the angle, how much depth the box required to house the device. And then Valerie, who is an electrician, she installed it for us once we resolved the corner pieces. So if we had bought this from the factory that we were recommended, it would have been $5,000. We did these for $250 each. We did 6 lights total. So this was a big win for us because it was proving at a scale that with digital technologies, you can solve and provide solutions for community groups and nonprofit organizations who really could benefit from just that elevated eye to give them something special, to give them something unique that's not available off the shelf. Or if you spend enough time with things that are on the shelf, how can you make them bespoke? How can you give them something different? So we actually 3D printed maybe 1/3 of all the angles, and then we were running out of time. So we sent the rest of the print job to a print farm, which was maybe 15 minutes drive from my office. And they printed the rest of the angles for us. It's a body with a cap. The cap snaps on, you're good to go. And it holds the lights in place. And then for the walls, this is actually 3 layers of material. 3/4 inch black wool is the foundation. And then we have kind of like a 1/8 layer of gray felt, which has been laser cut. And then the last layer, a little bit more accent, is where the logo for the organization is another layer of black felt just laid into the routed area. And so this is the pattern. It's actually, I believe, 8 unique panels. It's been a while. And this was the layout, and we just sent the CAD files, literally line files, to Josh, who is 5 minutes away from my office. I really try to only work with individuals who are in Oakland. We try to really be very, very hyper local. So Josh has a 10-foot long laser cutter that cuts fabric. He also has a CNC router. So he really did a fantastic job for us. It took maybe a week. Not even. The longest time was waiting on the material to be shipped, and then it was just a matter of cutting. So this is what the piece looks like, and then he pulls it off, and this is what it looks like, and it's in the final iteration mounted. And this was mounted in February last year, so it's just a few weeks before the country shut down, they were able to have their first public performance with the boards in place. And then we had to stop. They can't have live performances there anymore as a result of the COVID pandemic. But what was wonderful about this project is that it allows us to work with a client who had a really small budget to bring our ideas around design, but also to pull forward digital fabrication tools to solve a budget problem. And what this organization was able to do was to go back to their funders to prove that it was possible with a small budget to elevate the experiences of arts organizations. So now what we're doing is actually working with a couple arts funders and arts organizations to help them figure out how to use the limited resources they have and how to use contemporary design tools to bring design solutions at a low cost. This is just last weekend, I think on Sunday, Angela let me know that they've pivoted the floor plan and now the boards are actually their backdrop for their performances and their live streaming. So my takeaway or my invitation to the students is to not look or wait for something to come in your direction, but rather to go out there and seek it because it's right there in front of you, these opportunities to work and exercise your design talents, but you have to be willing to go directly to the communities and listen to what they say their needs are, and then bring your design sensibilities to the table to bring these contemporary tools to their use because they are desperately asking for support from the design community, but they don't know what that design is and they don't know that we exist. So this is really the end where I'm really hoping that I've inspired many of the students to not so much think about where will you work, because you can work anywhere and do this kind of work, but really ask yourself, how do you as a designer, urban planner, real estate developer, how do you see yourself in the context of helping our communities grow? And that's it. Thank you for attending. I really appreciate your being here, and I'm open for questions.
So the chat has been mentioning how certain projects especially appeal to different members of the audience. I don't know, do we have questions that people can either throw into the chat or I'm happy to call on someone?
Karen, can I ask my question?
Please, Richard.
June, that was a wonderful talk. I've been reading up on you and your accessory dwelling units and the work you've done for ARP and all of that. I just think it's the gift of giving architecture to so many people. I just hope all of our students are having what they think an architect is completely expanded. And the question I love, if I ever get a chance to ask the question, is what is your dream commission? If you could do anything, if something fell into your office right now, and it was exactly what you wanted to be doing, what would it be?
Okay, so this is gonna shock you, my answer, because I really love technology. And I used to work on wastewater treatment plants in the sense that redesigning them so that they were sustainable and friendly infrastructure that supports communities. If you notice, every wastewater treatment plant is like this fenced, high security away, usually tucked in the poorest communities. There's nothing attractive about it. I am fascinated by the pivoting of our infrastructure systems to be more sustainable and green and friendly and public amenities. So my dream project would actually be taking one of these utilitarian sites and transforming them into being these really kind of like, not park-like setting, but they are social amenities and social infrastructure, not just infrastructure that provides water. It's been a desire of mine to really re-examine infrastructure, the thing that supports us, to make it something that's far more innovative and far more exciting than this smelly, concrete, chemical-laden site, and have it be a green site. And Osaka actually did one, which I've been dying to go visit. But that is my dream, is to be able to convert one of these infrastructure sites that are smelly and have them become a social amenity, not just a treatment plant. That, yeah, I know it's not what you expected to hear, but that's it.
No, but thank you for sharing your vision. That's wonderful.
Some other questions here.
Yeah, Johnny.
Hi, awesome lecture. Thank you for doing that. Have you started for any chance to integrate the youth into like doing these small projects to kind of like bring them to the world of design and kind of have a pick of, you know, what that means, and kind of start motivating them to go towards, you know, design in any other, you know, in any way possible?
Yeah, we so on the street corner library, one of the reasons why it was on the street was to get little kids. And I put the Facebook page link in the chat earlier. But what I do two things. My studio is actually a retail store, so we have windows, and every day a kid stops and looks in the window. I am literally on display. They can see me at work. And I've had students knock on my window and ask questions. What is this? What are you doing? Want to know more. The library project, that was also one of those where we had kids tell us their views, their desires about what the library, what they thought a library could be. And then we also had some drawing exercises. I tend to stay away from the Post-it board experiences. I actually kind of detest that way of getting information. I really want people to take the chalk, write their ideas, decorate their ideas. They may not be sketch artists, but I encourage them to at least explore through the chalk on the blackboard through any means possible to express themselves. Then we've started to use VR. Using Sketchfab was one way where we put that out there, but also let everyone know that it was free. And so to encourage the kids to start playing with the free version of SketchUp and the free version of Sketchfab and put your ideas out there. One of the things I really try to encourage is less about the kid having a design idea and keeping it to themselves, but getting used to having a design idea and putting it out there in the world, and being, you know, just willing to just put themselves out there, put their ideas out there. That's how we've done it. I'm also, as the past president of SF NOMA, we have our project pipeline camp every summer. They're gearing up for it again. So that's how, as the past, and I always have my SF NOMA shirt on, so they know that about the National Organization of Minority Architects. So I'm always in advertising mode if I'm out in the public. So that's how I do it. But I have to also add that I'm an introvert, so I don't really do well with outreach. I'm better at observing and giving tools and then seeing what you do. So, but I have friends who are more extrovert and they're better at working with kids. I'm not, that's not me. I'm a watcher.
June, Kaylin Ford had a question.
Yeah, I have a question here.
Go ahead.
Hi, June. Thank you for all the lecture. It was very interesting. I'm from Mexico, and I'm quite in the residential area, you know, and while all this presentation, I was wondering if you had a one-on-one relationship with a residential project, and if one project, as Richard said, comes to your office, it's going to be residential, how do you, all this information, the research and all the work that you have done, can put it in a residential work, dealing with a client, with a budget, with, you know, how is to deal when they want a house? How can a professional of us can deal with that? Because these are amazing ideas, and I want to try to
they all have budgets. They're not projects that are just put out there without a budget. So because we're a studio that relies less on a fee, and more we create our own projects. One of the ways we fund our ideas is our 3D printer is constantly running. We sell our lamp designs. So we actually use the 3D printer as an income generator to support our design ideas. Richard mentioned our in-law unit work. That is heavily based on budget. The in-law unit is a small, usually a single-story structure that we are providing in California and nationwide. We have a housing crisis. And so one of the ways of dealing with a housing crisis is to allow smaller structures in people's backyards. And I'm not talking about tiny homes, I'm talking about actual studios with bathrooms and kitchens and decks, et cetera. Those all have low budgets. So none of our work is actually frivolous, but we also have done quite a bit of work on multi-unit housing. And one of the things which we're actually getting ready to publish, we've deliberately not shown multi-unit housing. One is because I'm trying to encourage students to actually go out and learn to observe and listen to their clients before we bring the solution. But we have worked with Deep East Oakland on a housing project is one. We have a couple projects in other cities. But what I'm willing to share right now is all of these projects actually are sustainable design projects where we're using CLTs and mass timber as our structural system. They're all sustainable design where we're recycling and reclaiming water. We're looking at the energy use of the building, but most importantly, we're looking at the social structures within multi-unit buildings, because I am zero interest in designing a multi-unit building. What I am interested in is designing a multi-housing and a multi-community building. And that is a whole different approach. For me, a multi-unit structure is just about boxes with people in them. It has nothing to do with how do people relate? How do they socialize? Where's the space to socialize? What it typically has is here's your apartment and here's your deck, and it's your deck only. In other cultures, they might have the deck and you share it. But I am far more interested in, now that we have to do a lot more multifamily design, where are those points where families are intersecting? And then we also have to address multicultural spaces. How do two different cultures, say one's Mexican and one's Jamaican, how are we relating? What are the differences? What are the similarities? How are we taking those differences into design? That's work that we do on our own, and then we present it. And to be honest, what happens is we pitch the idea to developers and say, this is the idea we have created. Are you interested in building it? Rather than waiting for the developer to come to us to say, we would like you to do a 100-unit building. That's not how my studio operates. We actually create the design idea first, the solution first, and then we try to find the person to build it. So that's how our relationship with AARP started, was we worked on the design first, and then AARP discovered us and started to support the work that we did.
Thank you.
Hello. That was a really thoughtful question, and the answer was just even better. I had to take notes on it. Just wanted to say that briefly. So I was wondering how your cultural background and how the spaces you experienced in your youth helped to guide and inspire you today.
Yeah, you know, I read somewhere that as designers, you're always designing your past. And I think I'm beginning to think it's true. So I'm originally from Jamaica, middle-class family. And one townhouse complex we lived in is still an inspiration to me. It had two housing designs. You had the bungalow, which were independent structures on one side of the street. And then you had the townhouses, which were attached, and they rung around a central park. So the smaller buildings backed up into a shared park, and the park was huge. We're not talking about some little tiny space. It was huge. And all the kids could be found in this park that was shared by everyone. Till this day, I still think that neighborhood influences my idea around how does two income levels exist in a community, and you provide the social outdoor spaces that support kids and adults and provide a space for people to come together in a safe environment. Because the park was not, while there was a gate, it was not exclusionary. If you're walking on the street, you could cut through the park to get, as kids, you would meander, and you'd never walk on the street itself, because you have your personal moment. You're talking to your friend, you take a circuitous route to where you want to go. To this day, I still think that neighborhood influences my approach to housing, and it's probably why I'm far more interested in how do you create the units and create a social space, a big enough space where not just adults, because most housing units today only have a rooftop garden, which is really for the adults 30 and above to have a drink. Where are the spaces for the kids? And where are the spaces for the seniors? And when I look back at where I was raised in this community, I see where that park allowed multiple generations to exist. And so I think that being raised in that environment where multiple generations live in the same house, but also horizontally, multiple generations and ages could also socialize in the same space, is a huge interest to me. And actually, it's something I've recognized that influences every project I look at, that I'm not able to segregate, here's only one use, one group that's going to use it. I just don't have that capability, and I'm not interested in isolated groups.
So I have two more questions, Karsu, then Alex. Yes?
Yes. Yeah, I was going to ask Jen about your design. Like, especially you mentioned about being, your background in Jamaica, living in Auckland, and African-American background, immigrant background. I was like thinking about, like, for example, there is a special style for some of the Nordic architects. Hadid, she's British, but she's Iraqi, so there's a lot of curve in her design. So is there any specific design that you gravitate towards that is coming from your cultural background that you'll want to emphasize? Is there, like, that's what I was gonna, that's my question. Like,
I have to tell you, I still can't abide the 90 degree. So in like Zaha, I just cannot do the box. And so I find every means, if I have to play with the roof line just to get asymmetry in a space, I'll do it. And I think Kara's laughing at me, but it's true. And so in a way, what I think is reflective of my background is this idea about hidden meaning and layering of information. So I don't have a canon that I exercise. This is modernism, and this is parametricism. If there's anything that reflects my interest, it is the hidden things that influences the line and the hidden information that results in the shape and the form. And I think that has to do with the fact that as a migrant, as an immigrant, you are a shapeshifter in the sense that you can't be your 100% authentic self from your culture once you've left that culture and now exist in another culture. This idea about fluidity around identity is something I realize is part of the migration pattern. And that really fascinates me. What that looks like aesthetically, I don't have an answer. But I do recognize that a straight line, it just doesn't work for me. I'm looking for hidden meaning.
I totally relate. I myself an immigrant. I'm from Turkey originally. So I have my Turkish side. I have the religious side. I'm also gay. I've been living in US. So do I, is trying to come out
it's
with my
all
own
of the above. It's all, and sometimes, right? Sometimes it's my love of material that comes forward. Like the awning project is purely my love of welding and material and metal. And there are other times where I'm really interested in the African-American experience, and I'm really diving into those experiences. So it's not everything all at once. It's just like cooking. Sometimes it's chicken and sometimes it's fish. It's not fish and chicken together. And so you have to make a decision about what is that dish you're making.
Yeah.
I actually enjoy that process of discovery.
Thank you. Alex,
Thank you.
you were going to ask.
Hi, June. Thank you for such a wonderful lecture. I actually want to build off of Rich's comment on how, after watching you, I feel like many of us students may start to perceive architecture as something else. I would like to say first that there are elements of decolonization, intersectionality, and community work that really inspire me in what you presented. But what I want to know is, being a woman in a predominantly male-oriented profession, being an immigrant, and to quote you, by being an immigrant, you have to be a shapeshifter, and also being a person of color, navigating through systems of whiteness. How would you define architecture?
How would I define it?
Yes, to bring it back to what you said in the beginning. You've mentioned the word agency, and I think that really struck me.
Yeah.
So how do you use that agency through your own?
You know, I think architecture is probably one of the most powerful tools. And it is most times misused, as we can see on our landscape. We don't acknowledge our own role in what we see on the ground, but design and architecture, I think, is probably the most powerful tool, because it is your line on the paper which is built. It is your instruction that was sent out there that someone else is building. Therefore, you're the one that started the whole thing. As an architect, it's like a law that no one else knows except you, and you have issued it, and it goes out into the world. And what I love about it is the responsibility that comes with it. What I also love about it is that I am the one that drew it. So I get to make the changes, I get to have the conversation. I also love that it is a multidisciplinary vocation. And for me, it is a vocation. I expect that I will die at my drafting table. This is how I will go at the end. There is no retirement for me. I see it as a lifelong journey that I've signed up for, but it's a journey that I actually truly enjoy, regardless of the barriers. I want to address the female question because it is related to my culture. I'm Jamaican and I'm female. Jamaica is a matriarchal society. Guess what? We're bossy. So it hasn't been a problem for me in my profession because of my cultural background. I also have a passion for technology, and because my desire and interest in technology puts me in the front of the pack, because I'm looking at what's coming down in terms of technology, that is uberly sexy. That is uberly important. While everybody else is dealing with status quo, I'm looking way ahead and I'm playing with tools and techniques about the future. That allows me to occupy a space that is unique in many ways. One of the few African-American women, or one of the few Black women who actually sits in the space of emerging technologies and looking ahead. It has allowed me to be in spaces that many are not in, but also because of my bossiness, I get there. I'm not asking for permission, I just show up. And I really encourage students to not ask for permission, just show up. Apologize after you've made the error. But I've also seen where, as a woman working now in the community and working a lot closer with the average construction trade, there is where I have learned or had to learn about how to bring the conversation to some groups. It's like the first time you show up in kindergarten where you're the new kid, getting to play in the sandbox takes an invitation. It takes, saddling up to the edge of the sandbox in the first place for someone to notice you. Then there is a willingness to be vulnerable and ask to play. There is a willingness to introduce yourself, and hopefully someone says, hey, my name is whatever. And you start that playing. It is a constant journey on learning how to communicate. And that's part of one of the things that we don't talk about enough in architecture school, but this skill set around communication, interpersonal communication is so paramount in what we do. It goes beyond the drawing, it goes beyond the making. It is everything to the success of a project. And so in my experience with architecture, coming back to your question, because I know it's so powerful, because I know it's a constant learning that will make some errors, because I know I have to interact and communicate sometimes very bizarre ideas, that I must be patient sometimes, which I very short amounts of. And so because my ideas are different from the mass, I put myself in the position where I am the catalyst for the change I want to see, because I'm not waiting for someone else to recognize what I see. It's my own vision. And if I want to see it, then I have to push through on it. And there are others who will come on board, and then there are others who will not. My last point on that is that I think there is no one single answer for architecture. And when you're in school, you tend to think you need to come up with the one right answer. There is no the one right answer. There's just some answers that are better, but there are millions of answers to a project. And so that's how I define architecture, is that it's multiple answers. It is a catalyst to change, and it's probably one of the most powerful professions you could have.
Thank you, June. What an amazing response to end on. Everyone, if you could unmute for just a moment and give a round of applause to June Grant.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, June.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anna, will you stop recording kindly?